Now, a very interesting way of working is to use entry points to learning in order to open up whatever topic you're dealing with. Now, in this case, the reason we have put this into the optional orientation session, and indeed we will all be doing this exercise later in a virtual way, is that we wanted to put you firstly in the situation where you were coming to something new yourselves for the first time. So this entry points to learning, in this case, it is part of the project Muse, and Muse stands for Museums United with Schools in Education. And this comes again from the world of multiple intelligences theory and how we might apply it in practice. Now, we will go in great depth to the multiple intelligences theory as part of the course, so I will be very summative in my remarks here. So, for example, multiple intelligences theory, what it points out to us is that people learn in different ways. We don't all learn, let's say, from a book. And therefore, the important point is that we then have to think about that in our teaching. If people learn in different ways, we have to honour that. And so we have to teach in different ways and assess in different ways and involve our students in different ways in our teaching. And one of the very helpful aspects of this work that Harold Gardner came up with, that goes hand in hand and aligns with the 8 intelligences that he has come up with, is this idea of a variety of entry points to learning. This is where multiple intelligences is where it hits the classroom. Because, of course, the theory itself is a cognitive theory of intelligence, but it doesn't tell us how to act, as it were, in the classroom. So this, for example, is where they connect. And we are going to use these entry points to learning in our visit to the Glucksman to explore a painting. Now, this is the other key aspect before we get started, that when we are looking at these works of art, we want to respect them as art. So we will be in the Glucksman, as indeed you might be in any other artistic site. We are there in order to appreciate the work as well and to respect it as art and to treat it as art. So we are not attempting to dumb down the work and use it only for an educational purpose, but rather that we will have the pedagogical and the artistic intertwined. So anyway, to come to the entry points now, we have at least 5 of them here in front of us, and these are a set of questions devised by the Harvard Graduate School of Education research team who were working in the 1990s with many of the schools around Boston, indeed second and first level schools. And those of us who in those years attended the Harvard Grad School of Education and taught there and indeed studied there, we were used to ourselves going to the various museums like the Sackler and the Fogg Museum and taking with us this bank of wonderful questions so that we might open up the paintings and discuss them as one would indeed any research topic. But again, the great advantage was, of course, that we had all the sensory richness of the artworks to draw on, and that it was a highly stimulating, engaging environment. You will note also, of course, that when you will be looking and working at these, you are in either the gallery context in a real sense, so a new space. The Glucksman, for example, is a magnificent learning space, huge, big, broad gallery whereby you can lose yourself and find yourself again. Or you may be in a virtual space, again, where you and the work are intimately linked and you can see it in all its guises. Now, so for example, one entry point, the first one is the narrative or the narrational. So the question would be, what story is this artwork telling you? But equally, for example, if we were studying mathematics, we could be asking, what is the story of Pythagoras' theorem? So the entry points are infinitely applicable to every single discipline. And you might ask yourself, gosh, should I go in a different way into my lesson next time, into my lecture? One doesn't always start, for example, with a story, but one might start, let's say, with a picture. and so on. So again, this will open up for you as well new ways of thinking about your teaching and give you a bank of strategies whereby you might use these, some tools, more tools in the box to make indeed your classroom more engaging and to allow students to enter in different ways. We will be coming later to the idea of universal design for learning, which again makes the point that we need as lecturers to represent knowledge in different ways, that we need to engage our students in a variety of ways and to give them multiple ways of expressing what they have understood. So then moving on, the foundational entry point, for example, asks us to look really at the big questions, and it's a more philosophical entry point. So for example, here in the light of the artwork, look at that first question, which asks, take a look at the colours in this work of art. Why do you think these colours were used? Do colours have meaning? And then, for example, you might think as well, in the experiential, if you were a colour in this work of art, what colour would you be? And so there are many ways into the entry points that will help you to see the learning experience more fully. And then the aesthetic entry point, for example, asks, look at the colours in this work of art. Which one did you see first? Was colour the first thing that you noticed? What else caught your eye? So again, you're speaking to the aesthetic of it, to the shape of the work, the colours that emerge in it. And finally, the logical entry point. What colour did you see most or least in this work? What colours do you see least of in the work of art? So again, we will come to all of this in more depth as the course unfolds, but it's very interesting to see how these entry points play out, let's say, in the light of a painting. So again, in summary here, the narrative will tell the story. The foundational one asks usually the philosophical questions. In the experiential one, you're very much hands-on involved in the experience. In the aesthetic, you are looking at it as a work of art, literally. And logically, then, you are thinking of it perhaps deductively, in sequence. So let's go down and let's take perhaps another bank of questions so that you might understand this a little more. So for example, still under narrational then, does anything you see happening in this work of art remind you of your own life story or of another story you know? So the idea, of course, again, is that you can tell that story. And whereas you would not answer all of the bank of narrational questions, you could, in exploring the work of art, take 2 or 3 of them that speak to you, and you will find that they open up the work in unexpected ways. Again, under the foundational, for example, you're asking, does this work of art speak to you? Is art a language? What is said through art that cannot be said through words? So these bring up the philosophical questions about art, for example, and the arts, in which so many of us are profoundly interested. So these are great questions. Again, then, in terms of the experiential, is there something that has happened in your own life that this work of art makes you think of? And you might draw a picture of that experience. And again, under aesthetic, describe the space that you see created by this work of art. Does it remind you of a place in your own life? So again, you are, thinking of the shape of it and the nature of it. And finally, logically, is this work of art older or younger than you are? And how can you tell? So these are, broader logical questions that may help you. Now, let us come finally. So you see here, there are 3 pages of wonderful questions to open up the work. And think of the idea of an entry point, literally, as Gardner describes it, as a series of doors into a room. So here you have at least 5 doors. And of course, there's also the social entry point, which isn't discussed here, because of course you are doing that social entry point together as you unpack the work. So again, we will skip through the page, the second page, but let us come finally just to some of the questions on the 3rd page, so that again you get the variety of how the entry points can be approached in different ways. So in this final page, for example, that narrational question, if you were telling the story of this work of art, what would you call it? So this is interesting that you might think of what title, and often, as you know, in artists' work, they say it's untitled. So it's interesting, what title would you give it? And that again makes you think about the heart of the work and the significance of it and the story of it. And foundationally, you could be answering the question, look at the title of the work of art, if there is one given. Why do you think it has this title? Should it have titles? Should artworks have titles? So this is again the philosophical idea. Should they be all thought of as untitled, short? And we see so much of this, of course, in works of art. Experientially, one could ask, take a look at the title of the work of art, write a poem or a dance that would have the same title. So this again could be very exciting for you in terms of the experiential. And then aesthetically, think of a title for this work of art that is based on what you have noticed so far, the colours, the lines, the shapes, the textures. You see there the whole aesthetic spectrum opening up for you. Then take a look at the actual title of the work. On what do you think that title was based? So again, look at all the different ways you can interrogate the title. I think it's a marvellous bank of resources to give you, in that it opens up your teaching, gives you different alternatives, new strategies to think things through. And finally, there logically, take a look at the title of this work of art. Does knowing the title change the understanding or appreciation of the work of art? And how is that the case? And you see that the final bank of questions in the narrational, for example, ask you to think back on the stories you have discovered, what you've learned from them. Have you learned anything about your own life story, for example, from these? And finally, I like the one under logical. We'll just end with that one. Imagine that a group of educators did not want students to see this work of art. These educators said that there was nothing to learn from looking at it. Make an argument for what there is to learn from looking at this work of art. And as I said to you, the marvellous thing about these entry points to learning is that they're infinitely transferable to the discipline, and that you can find marvellous questions there to open up aspects of the work for your own students in the variety of disciplines in which you work. Finally, just to say that in terms then of going to the Glucksman Gallery and using this, we see the Glucksman Gallery space as very much a space wherein we can learn. It's an artistic space, but also a pedagogical space. And so this means as well that you are learning how to learn, and that, as I said at the beginning, you come like the student to the unknown. And we need to take you back to that place so that you might appreciate as well how challenging it is for our students when they walk into our classrooms for the first time. You know, that journey of knowing before them, the lack of confidence often in them, the meek voice, they're very much waiting for us to tell them how to think and what to say. And so here you will find yourself in the presence of a work of art, and you need to respond to it and to listen to others talking about it and to learn from them and to share ideas. So you'll also be in a collaborative learning space. This is about developing a community of learners as you do in your research in the discipline. And there are many ways of constructing that community. We'll be doing it with you in the online discussions, but also in moments, real and virtual, let's say in the Glucksman Gallery or other galleries, whereby you together are collaboratively learning, responding, hypothesizing, problematizing, working things out together, all the hallmarks of any research process. But key at this point, early on in the course, that you are taken out of your comfort zone so that you can identify with your students. Equally key to remember that encountering art, that the arts are equally, along with the sciences, highly intellectual processes, that to read a work of art is a higher order thinking escapade. It isn't just some airy-fairy, touchy-feely stuff. It is very much, again, where you have to summon the evidence, where though it appeals to your senses, you are working things out. So you are always engaged in that higher order thinking. And just to finally say that our learning experiences can come in many guises. And an artistic experience, drawing as it does on all of our senses, can give us a very rich, worthwhile learning experience. And we hope that these experiences will last with you for quite some time, and that again you maybe have the opportunity to use such work with your own students so that they will also appreciate what it is to stand before a work and to unpack it from a variety of perspectives and gain from the richness of that experience.